I'm so broke, I can't even afford the heating bill.
Well, I am so broke I don't even have a pot to piss in.
What on earth does that mean?
You think I'd know that?
You said it.
Guys, I'll explain it to you. To understand the phrase not a pot to piss in, we need to go back in time to medieval Europe. During this period, people used chamber pots, which were essentially large bowls used as a toilet. Chamber pots were made out of ceramic or metal and were kept under the bed or in a designated corner of the room. They were used as a temporary solution for those who did not have access to a proper toilet. In those days, urine was actually considered valuable, as it was used for tanning leather, making gunpowder, and even for cleaning clothes. As a result, people would put their urine in a pot and sell it to those who needed it. Imagine trying to do that nowadays. Hey, would you like to buy some wee? It's great for tanning leather. Yeah, it's not exactly a lucrative business now, is it? However, the poor did not have the luxury of selling their urine, so they would instead use it to dye their clothes yellow because they were poor and couldn't afford the proper fabric dyes. Now, let's fast forward a few years to the 18th and 19th century. This is when the phrase not a pot to piss in started to become popular. During this time, chamber pots were still in use, but people had begun to empty them into the streets, which led to a foul smell and unhygienic living environment. As a result, the government introduced a tax on chamber pots. It was meant to discourage people from emptying them in the streets. It was known as a piss pot tax and was really, really burdensome for the poor. They couldn't afford to pay it. The tax was so high that many poor people couldn't even afford to buy a chamber pot in the first place, and they'd have to relieve themselves in public. Talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. Either pay the tax or risk public embarrassment. But at least the government was trying to encourage better hygiene. Although, don't think taxing bodily fluids is the right way to do it. I think they just should have provided chamber pots instead. This is where the expression not a pot to piss in comes from. It was a derogatory way of describing someone who was so poor they couldn't even afford a chamber pot to relieve themselves in. The expression gained popularity in the 18th and 19th century and has since become a part of the English language. Thank goodness we no longer have to rely on chamber pots to relieve ourselves in. And especially have to tip them out. Imagine going to your partner, I'm gonna go tip the toilet out the window, make sure no one walks by. They'd think you're crazy. Anyway, modern systems have made it possible for everyone to use a flushing toilet with plumbing, no matter their wealth. However, the phrase not a pot to piss in remains in use for the time where we didn't know the importance of simple hygiene. I just don't understand how we got chucking the toilet out the window was a good idea. Well, at least it was better than what the Aussies did.
Well, now I'm curious. What did the Aussies do?
Yeah, tell us.
Okay, okay. Relax. I'll explain. Just promise not to be grossed out. The long drop style toilets, also known as pit latinaries or dry toilets, have been in use for thousands of years, dating back to ancient civilizations such as the Egyptians and Greeks. These toilets consist of a hole in the ground that is covered with a wooden or concrete slab, and it also has a ventilation pipe to reduce odors. The waste collects in a pit or a trench, and when it's filled, is typically covered with soil and left to decompose. Except some Aussies put a bucket instead of a slab, and when the toilet bucket got full, they waited for the poo trucks to come. A man would quite literally come to your house, pick up the bucket of your poop, and put it in his truck. You definitely wouldn't want to have diarrhea in those days. The buckets would fill, clogging up the toilet. Also, if the bucket bottom was rusty and you were carrying it, yeah, you don't want that to be you, because that isn't fun to clean. All in all, the phrase not a pot to piss in sure does have some colourful, actually, more of a yellow backstory behind it. It is a good thing that we've improved. Don't have a piss pot tax and don't use chamber pots anymore. Unfortunately, there are still some countries that charge people to use a toilet nowadays.
Oh, okay. So, what I got from that is that people used to have something called chamber pots that they used to just throw out the window.
And people used to be taxed by this.
So, if you couldn't afford that tax, you couldn't go to the toilet.
Exactly right.
You seem like fun. I'm gonna keep you.
Heh, thanks. I'm glad I could enlighten you in the phrase. And sure, I'm always happy to have new friends. Just remember, if you ever need to go to the toilet, you don't need a chamber pot and you don't need to throw it out the window. Just use the regular toilet. But could this all be a myth? Stay tuned for part 2, where I will explain the other side of the story.